when the business started to do cash flow, to have like some respectable numbers coming through each month, did you find that was like a big portion of your development just as a young person being exposed to money?
Yeah, and I think my relationship for money has always been the more money you have, the more people you can help. I remember saying that to a group of people in 2019 and they're like, well, no, that's not true. And I'm like, well, yes, it is. Can't help people when you're poor.
Yeah, you can help people cross the road. You can pick up the groceries. You can do the nice things, but you can't have impact.
The more money you have, the more impact you can create.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me. And what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan. Your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the...
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast. It has been a little bit of time, a couple of weeks break in between episodes, but I'm excited to bring today Will Massara. Welcome.
It is an absolute pleasure, Rhys.
Thanks for making the time to get down here, man. I know it's you're a busy man, you're traveling all over the place, and you're got a lot going on, so I appreciate it.
No, the only part about Melbourne I don't like is the weather.
Mate, I feel that to my core. Rather than give everyone the extremely long introduction that would do you a lot of justice, what's your too long didn't read version of events and who you are and what you do?
Oh, I like this. I am an angry child, well, no longer. And it led me to make a few little decisions that led into business, one being a aviation consulting and media website at 11 years old, and then moving into my second business at 15, which is leadership and empowering young people to now be able to travel around Australia and working with over 1,000 schools.
Amazing. Cool. So that's obviously a very, quick synopsis of what you've done and who you are. Let's look at what I like to do here, and we spoke about it a little bit off camera, is I like to look at the strategy behind business owners, what makes a good business owner. So I think to kind of flash this back and kind of give everyone a little bit of an understanding as to where this all started for you, where it came from. What's your earliest memory of seeing leadership of a good quality?
I think for me, what leadership and what entrepreneurship mean is about seeing a problem and creating a solution. And I do also believe that from as long as I remember, I've saw a problem and created solutions. And that would be whether it be in home, whether it be in school, whatever it may be, from primary school to then seeing my first solution at 11 years old of my mum running through an airport stressed, which led to my first solution. That was my first sort of glimpse of leadership. But then at the same time, there was also, I saw my mum, who was a incredibly hard worker as a single mum, who had her own small business on the side as well as working. And I think that commitment and dedication to giving me and my brother a good life was leadership. And then I also see my dad, who's an incredibly innovative thinker. I also think that's leadership as well. Mm-hmm.
So what do you define leadership for yourself as now?
For me now, leadership is about courage and doing things that scare you, even when there will be critics, even when there's people going against you, but doing things that you believe in with courage. Okay,
so you've been in some pretty big rooms over the time. Like, yeah, I've read a little bit about your story. I've kind of dove into all things Will over the last 48 hours. You've created some partnerships, created great networks, and all as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, and now as a 20-year-old. What do you feel like some of the biggest challenges are? And I'm assuming this will really kind of paint the picture into why you feel like youth leadership is the answer for the future. But what are some of the challenges that you felt like you faced purely because of your age?
I think that everybody faces an age problem, regardless of young or old.
Explain.
My biggest thing is your age doesn't determine your ability to achieve extraordinary things.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what age you are, there will always be a limit of, I feel too young or I feel too old. And to that I say, well, I started my first business at 11 and Colonel Sanders started KFC at 65. And I do believe that the only way to overcome this challenge of age being a barrier is by action. Doing more and more things that challenge that status quo, but not only ourselves, but our friends and our peers, encouraging them to move past that. And also showing examples of age not mattering and age not being a limiting factor. And that was obviously a big part of what led me into youth leadership. And I think one of the second biggest challenges would be, how do you own your story as a young person when there's no one around you that looks or feels or does the same thing as you? Because there was a long time that I felt isolated and I felt alone for doing this thing that I thought that was known as entrepreneurship or leadership, even when I couldn't spell it.
Mm. Cool. Talk to me about that feeling about like of loneliness, of being alone. What do you mean?
When I went into high school, I had a plane website. You know how cool planes are in high school? Exactly, right? Like, it was like the most dorkiest thing ever. And there's like the challenge of, do you either own that story? Do you own that story of being a plane nerd? Do you own that story of being an entrepreneur, or do you hide it, right? Because there's always that choice of that social cost of it almost. And for a long time, I tried to hide part of it, and I tried to hide part of myself to be more liked by others or to be accepted by society. Mm-hmm. And that led me down feeling isolated and feeling alone, because there was no one around me that was doing that or thinking that. And it wasn't until I was 15 that I started actually realizing that the only way we get to where we want to be of finding more people like myself is actually putting energy into finding areas like it, because I wasn't doing anything to look for people like me. I just looked around and there was like, there's no one here.
Mm-hmm. Where did you start to look?
This is when I think my personal development, every day in life is personal development, but the real personal development journey of like going to events began at 14. I attended a leadership summit in Sydney. I applied for it through my bank, and the only reason I applied was for a free flight to Sydney, because obviously plane nerd. And I got that, and I was exposed to an environment of 300 young people from around the world who were empowered, who were looking for ways to lead and looking for ways to create change and looking for ways to become entrepreneurs. And I was like, okay, there's more people that think like me. And it was from that moment that I started surrounding myself with not only other people like that, but I also started engaging other people around me in areas like that as well. Yeah,
okay. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, especially young. Like I speak to a few young people still, and I'm not that old, but
no, you're not.
I think like you mentioned there the word action and taking action, doing things, but I feel like so many people just either play victims of, they don't know the people on how to get the skill sets or where to get them. They don't know how to get in those type of rooms, and they don't know how to take the action.
Yeah, 100%. I had no idea how to take the action either. And this is why I started when I was 15, was because there was absolutely no risk. Mm-hmm. There's no risk. I was very privileged to have a stable house. I didn't have to pay for my bills. I didn't have to pay for food. Mm-hmm. When I went home after school every day, I knew I was going to get fed. So people were like, why didn't I wait until I left school? Because the risk is a lot more. Mm-hmm. I have to fund something else as well. I was working 3 jobs at the time, but the only way to get into rooms like that is by trying and doing more and more and more. And I remember in recess and lunch of every single day in year 11, picking up the phone and calling literally every single school in Western Australia and asking them to come to my event in a high-pitched 15-year-old voice.
Yeah.
And it taught me a lot about rejection.
Yep. I think that's important though in any business.
It was so good. And I think every time I picked up the phone call, I became a little bit better. I adjusted a little bit to start getting yeses more. Mm-hmm. And then I also think I have had a very strong belief of, if you don't ask, you don't receive. And I don't know where that came from. I think it just came from wanting to get something and wanting more than being mediocre. And I remember, I think a core memory for me is I used to write quote of the days for my mum when I was like 9 or 10. Yeah. And one of them was, you did not wake up to be mediocre, mum. I was like, and I think that was also for me, it was like, I did not wake up today to be mediocre, and I still believe I don't wake up to be mediocre any day still. So I think that led to a lot of action, and I think that led to a lot of just trying and throwing myself out there publicly, knowing that, especially as a young person, there will be criticism and there will be people who cringe. And I came up with this theory last year when I started doing TikTok, is they will only cringe until they congratulate you. Mm-hmm. So like the people who may have cringed at the Planopedia, they weren't cringing when I was working with Qantas and Singapore Airlines. The people who cringe when I started a leadership academy, because leadership has a social cost in schools, we know that. That's why we don't see a diverse student bodies in many schools. They don't cringe when they're going to see us working with over 1,000 schools around Australia, or having the ability to travel flexibly and do whatever I like.
I think there's a lot to that. I'd like to unpack a lot of that. There's when we talk about like, prospective haters or people that are just like, throwing shade, do you feel like that's something that a lot of people will, I guess, use as a reason not to start?
Yeah, but I also think that's an excuse. Well, not necessarily an excuse, but I think it's a belief that you need to work on. There's I don't know who says that, I think it might be Brene Brown, but it's like, no matter where you are, there'll be the critics in the back row that throw the apples, throw the rotten tomatoes, but you're the one in the arena. Mm-hmm. You're the one showing up, unless someone else is in the arena, they have no right to criticize. And this is all well and good until like it really happens to you, right? Like, Rhys, I'm sure you may have seen, I was in a Daily Mail article last year, 215 hate comments and one nice comment. It's like, it does get to you.
Of course.
Like, my mum was on the phone crying. I'm like, Mum, it's fine. It's just like, it's Judge Judy from Antarctica. Like, I'm not fast.
Yeah.
And it does take a certain level of resilience to not only combat people that judge you and people that may have their opinions, but also to deal with the everyday challenges of business. And I think if you don't believe in your story enough, they will win.
Okay, cool. Believing in your story. Where do you feel like your belief in your story came from? Because I would assume that you, from the little I do know about you, there was a journey of, maybe a bit of pushback to authority, being an angry kid in school, not seeing that wasn't the answer to the solution, or to the problem, sorry. So believing in your story and finding that belief system in your story, why do you think you do?
I do believe there was a real turning point. I can pinpoint the moment that this sort of happened as well. And it was like at one of the earliest peaks of my career, you could say, but it was like working with Qantas as a 15-year-old in Adidas shorts and a t-shirt. At the moment, still feeling isolated and feeling alone, but there was also something in me that clicked, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe these differences are the things that set me apart. Maybe these differences are the things that allow me to move forward.
Yep.
And ever since then, I made a commitment to not only own my story, but empower others to own theirs. Because the reality is, if we own our story, we reach more people, we get to have more impact, and we get to create more change, I do believe, yeah.
A question then, and try and, I guess, remove expectations on the answer. Do you still feel alone?
I thought about this. I did reflect on this in Fiji, and I think I do. However, I don't feel alone in the sense of there's a lot of people around me doing the same thing. There's a lot of entrepreneurs around me. I'm surrounded by the environments. Do I think I'm lonely? I think so. Mm-hmm. And I'm not mad about it either, because I'm in a real moment of hustle and grind right now.
Solitude.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the benefit to that for you, at least?
Focus. 100% focus. I think I've spent 2 years traveling, and those were like the most extremely transformation growth period of my life. And it was also a lot of time of maybe not 100% of focus. But it left me with such a fire inside of me to be really focused right now and be able to create a life that gives me flexibility, that changes lives and leaves a legacy.
With that alteration to your lifestyle, as far as just like being somewhat of a nomad lifestyle and just, traveling slowly and still working, but did that impact the business at all? Did that require some backward steps with business?
Positively. It was a net positive.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is because there was definitely things that took a back step. But if I didn't take that back step, we wouldn't have been able to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Cool. How? What do you mean by that?
We were in the deep, dark part of COVID, mm-hmm. And there was no money. I was 18 years old. I was tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And when you're that age and you have that stress on you, it's like, what do you do? And I remember walking to the office in Perth one morning. It was 3 degrees. It was pitch black. And my coping mechanisms at the time was to work longer, work harder, work more, which is like, everyone be like, well, what's the problem with that? I'm like, well, my entire identity is pinned on
the success of this thing.
The success of while I in the business. And when the business was failing, I felt like I was failing. And that led to me looking and seeing and wondering, what am I going to do to change this? And it was changing my environment. And I literally left Perth 2 days later with $400 in my bank account and began the nomad lifestyle. And what that set was a trajectory back up. to be able to find focus, to be able to find energy, and to be able to find sort of meaning for what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it.
Because I think like I've experienced this, and I think a lot of business owners, when they get to that point of like a point of scale and the business grows, but they can grow into implode. Like to a point where it's like, okay, it keeps growing. If it grows in this way and I'm not prepared for this, it's going to blow up.
We went from 1 to 5 staff in the space of like 2 months.
Yeah.
1 staff being me.
Yeah. So full solopreneur to moving up into that leadership scale just in a 2-month time period. It's
like I'd never even seen money that was coming in, right? Like it was like tens of thousands of dollars a month. And I was like, okay, well, this is happening. And it led to not having operational strategy, not having systems, and not having structure in place to be able to support that, which did lead me to get business coaches, which did lead me to actually start my MBA as well.
Yep. Okay. So was that all in conjunction when you were taking that step back and trying to find a new shift of lifestyle?
No, it was a bit earlier. It was about 9 months earlier when I could see that things were going up in a faster spiral than I could ever imagine.
Yep.
And this was during COVID, right? So and it was because none of our competitors were still moving forward. We gained massive market share, but we also made a commitment to run all of our programs regardless of the cost, because there was no more important time for young people to come together than during COVID. And that was a reality, and we accepted that. And then a few months later, we dealt with the consequences of that as well, which I don't regret.
Yeah. What were those consequences?
Financial pain. It was the pinning of the worth of myself. It was a lot of relationships being tested as well, because we owed people money. We owed staff money. We owed contractors money, and it was all of that. And it was working towards how do we rebuild this?
What was your personal experience with that? I feel like generally when, the chips are down and money's involved, people show their true colors. What was your experience with that?
From me, I have had a very blessed. I'm very blessed to have people around me who I think we've worked together very collaboratively to be able to keep the business alive.
Amazing.
And I'm very blessed for all of the people that have helped me through these periods as well. Whether that be our suppliers, whether that be contractors who have been patient with us through everything, right? To be able to, because they also know that one day this is going to be much bigger than just what it is right now. Yep. And they're here for that journey. Okay.
So you said that there weren't, when you hit this point of, I guess you could see that the implode was on the horizon. What kind of strategy did you start to employ into the business? Like you mentioned operational strategies and financial strategies and so on. So what did you do? What were the steps you took to actually turn this into a quote unquote real business?
Yeah. Number one, systems.
Yeah.
Our systems are now our best friend, from CRMs to just newsletters to how do we keep our current clients engaged, which has been able, and which is what is the real reason the business is alive right now, right? And why we have profited this year as well. Because we have had systems, we have had structure, we have had strategy pointing us in the direction that we want to go. And what that looks like is when things are in a down, when the seasons are down, we have customers or we have clients to rely on who we can go to and be like, here's an offering, what are your thoughts on it? As well as that, we still have a lot of little work that we can set out. And then now, because of the things we've done year after year, we can now just launch another campaign when it may be needed to be able to support more young people in areas around Australia.
What's some of I was looking on your website, you've got client facing or student facing frameworks that you implement across the business. What are some of the frameworks on the back end? Like if we look at systems, what are some of the frameworks you've started to actually implement into using strategies and systems? Like if we can give people a little bit more of a rather than a bird's eye view, right? Let's dive into the nitty gritty of what are some of the systems that have actually helped you grow this thing?
I think the biggest one is actually probably a sales process that doesn't exist in the industry.
Okay, cool.
So there's no one else doing school programs who provide one face-to-face calls and on Zoom or proposals. They would get a quote. And whereas we sit down with someone and tailor make a program towards their needs after that conversation and then present a proposal. That has fundamentally changed. I say with confidence that every sales call that we've been on has been a success
Mm-hmm.
because there is no one else doing it in the industry. I think the second thing that we've done that has been really positive on the business is the most basic thing that anybody and everybody should do is like weekly newsletters that are co-beneficial.
Okay, what do you mean by co-beneficial?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I have a big problem with a lot of things in the world, but one of them is when things only benefit one person or one side or one company.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a newsletter should be a element of co-benefit where both parties should benefit. There should be resources, there should be tools, there should be things for free for schools and for clients and whatever industry you're in. And what you should expect in return is loyalty, if that.
Yep.
And I think that's what's expected. And then they know who to go to when they need something. It's not like you're necessarily begging or asking for it. They know you exist and they know you're there for them.
Mm-hmm. Devil's advocate, because this might just be me being super naive. A newsletter, how do you, like, give me an example that is one-way beneficiary? What's the example of that? I've not seen a business in a very long time, or I don't really, I've just not been exposed to it, where say like a email gets sent out to an email list, generally would be beneficial for the person reading it. Like that would be the default, right? So in what cases is it only going to be beneficial the other direction, so only for the business? Is that just like call to actions only?
I think like it's probably a spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than like, because there's still benefit if you still send a call to action, there's probably still 10% benefit for the consumer of them being reminded, I might need this one day.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas 90% of it is for the business.
Yep.
They're the one making the money. The customer may be like, this will impact me greatly. So I still think there is, but co-beneficial probably means 40-60, 60-40, 50-50, whatever it may be.
Yep.
Or in that middle.
Yeah, cool. So do you have any sort of like defaults that you kind of rely into and lean into, that if someone was listening to this, okay, cool, I'm going to go create a co-beneficiary asset or, send out?
Give without expectation.
Great.
Give without expectation.
Okay, cool. Have you seen a large return on that personally?
Yeah. And I think I've seen that both my personal profile, whether it be on LinkedIn, whether it be a newsletter, whether it be social media.
Mm-hmm.
I post quite regularly with no intention to return. But what I do get in return is interest, whether I get engagement. And even like on LinkedIn, it leads to speaking inquiries. It leads to opportunities like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely.
Cool. What's some of the things you did? Like you said, you were in like, a decent amount of debt there, and financial stress was pretty high. What's some of the things you did to kind of swing that the other way?
I remember having this call with one of our suppliers. It was pretty daunting. I was in Bali at the time because I literally couldn't afford to live in Australia. And they were like, okay, well, we need the money. And I'm like, well, we can't get the money. And they're like, well, we're going to send a debt collector. I'm like, well, we're going to go bankrupt. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, there was a period where there was literally like a few $100s in the account or a few $1,000s, and these bills were 20 to 30 grand, right? And to get out of them, it was like, what new offerings can we create that not only, again, benefit us as a business, but also benefit the community and also benefit our clients, which is where we looked at working with local government, and on a much bigger scale. And that provided us pretty much a lifeline. And now we work with about 25 local governments around Australia. I can imagine there was a time, I'm assuming it was virtual being that you were in Bali, but what was the strategy session like with your team or your mentors, that sitting there like a virtual whiteboard? What was that like, sitting there going like, fuck, how do we brainstorm this? What are the answers to this problem? And what were some of the other options that you actually decided against? I think the biggest thing of once being told is like, once you're pushed against the wall, you like break down the wall.
Yeah, you got two options. Kick the fucker down or
die. Yeah. And I think there was like an option. Literally, I remember typing to Google, "What happens when you go bankrupt?" As a 19-year-old, and which is a very confronting Google search. Which I never really got the answer to, which I'm happy to report. And like that was an option that was seriously there. But for me, it was like, that's the easy way out. The other option is to find more work, find more clients, create more impact. And we obviously went to that direction. And then the other one was to host more events. And for me, it was like, we're not hosting any more events because the outlay of events is enormous.
Well, that would have been just kind of doing the math, that would have been put you more into debt to then get you further. Yeah.
Literally.
2 steps backwards for maybe 1 step forward.
And like we've run events at a loss, and that's just normal. Your first series of events in any city are generally operate as a loss.
Yep.
I don't know if that's just me, but I think it's a giving with no expectation. We shouldn't expect to make money on an event that we've never run in a city where we have no trust or reputation.
How do you combat that?
Having enough structure beyond the event. And I think a call to action at an event is pretty necessary to be able to recoup them losses and be able to have a follow up, whether it be another program or something, a higher ticket item, which is often what you see. However, our struggle is our consumers are not our users. So we're selling to people who don't even use our program, which is schools and local government.
So do you want, okay, cool. Let's kind of dive into that a little bit, because I think that from a business perspective, there's a quote here that I live by a lot. A good entrepreneur will fail in a bad market, right? You still need a good market to make the good better, right? How have you navigated that whole thought process of like the users and not the purchasers?
Why we're the right person for the market? I'll answer that question, which may help every other question, is because it's young people having conversations with young people, which has never been done before at a scale or effort that we've done. And that is why we have gained market share in secondary, and that's why we've worked with over 10% of schools around Australia, is because we understand young people better than anyone else.
Because you are also young.
Because we are also young, yes. Yeah. And we take it to a level further of building a youth advisory board who advises on programs for people in school right now.
Okay, so like from what age group?
12 to 17.
Amazing.
And they're like people like in school telling, because like even for me, I'm 3-4 years out of school. It's like, I don't really know what's happening in there. I don't know the problems. Yeah. So how do we find out? We have conversations with young people. There are too many conversations happening in the world about young people without young people in the room. And that is a firm belief I have.
I don't think that's not really a belief statement. That's a fact.
That's a fact, yeah. And I also believe in any area, like there's too many conversations happening about a community without the community.
Yeah. Yep. What have you found to be because we can talk about that in a very, I guess, top level example that, for young people, by young people, it sounds great. It's great. It's a great tagline. It's very socially appealing, right? What's the business benefit to that being, like having young people be so involved in the actual delivery and the, I guess, development of the program? Has that actually had any sort of strategical benefit?
Yeah, that's our X factor for sure. 100% our X factor. And I think also from a business point of delivering product, it's also why our product is so good as well.
Cool. So what makes a good product in your eyes?
What makes a good product in my eyes? Conversation and compassion and empathy with the consumer. Having an understanding of what the consumer needs and solving a problem for them.
Okay. How do you find that out?
Asking questions. Ask meaningful questions and you'll get meaningful responses.
Yeah. I say it the other way. I say you ask shit questions, you get shit answers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think if you go in with the perspective of wanting to help and wanting to support rather than I want to make money because like in reality, if you're in personal development and you're seeking money, you're not going to survive. That's also a fact. And you would know people who've done it.
Absolutely.
So when you go in, again, it's that co-beneficial thing, right? Like for sure, there's benefits of having a really profitable business for you, but there's also, if it's really profitable, it means it's beneficial for not only you.
Yep. Yeah, I totally understand that. I totally agree. I think there's far too often so many entrepreneurs, so many business owners, even just startups, just fall into this idea of money first, people second. Yeah. And if you're just going to, as soon as you start fall into that mindset, you start asking shit questions, you get shit answers.
Yeah, exactly. And like I've been through that and I'm lucky that I went through it very young.
Yeah, likewise.
And to figure out that, nope, this isn't it.
Do you find that like because you were young when the business started, you're still young, but like when the business started to do cash flow, to have like some respectable numbers coming through each month, did you find that was like a big portion of your development just as a young person being exposed to money?
Yeah, and I think my relationship for money has always been the more money you have, the more people you can help. I remember saying that to a group of people in 2019 and they're like, well, no, that's not true. And I'm like, well, yes, it is.
It's fact.
Can't help people when you're poor.
Yeah. Yeah, you can help people cross the road. You can pick up the groceries. You can do the nice things, but you can't have impact.
The more people you have, the more money you have, the more money you have, the more impact you can create.
Yep.
So that's been my relationship with money. Getting exposed to that has been a huge development.
Mm-hmm.
And also a huge amount of, I think like at one point there was like tens of thousands of dollars coming in a month, probably like 30, 40 grand, which I'm happy to share because
that's business. Money's business, man. It is what it is. Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, this is a lot. This is a lot of money, and then realizing only 6 months later, we're now in debt. I'm like, oh wow, what happened?
What's going on, everyone? Hope you're well. I won't keep you too long. I know you're hopefully enjoying the podcast, and if you are, let us know. It would be really greatly appreciated if you can jump on, give us a quick 5-star review. You don't even need to stop listening to the show. If you're on Spotify, you can do it in less than 10 seconds, and it does help the show grow a lot. It helps us, get a bit of confirmation bias that we're doing the right thing. And just to say thank you, if you guys do that, we're going to be picking one person every month to guest spot on the podcast that has shared, liked, comment, subscribed, and interacted with what we do. Big thank you. Let's get back to it. That's actually a very interesting thought process, because I feel like so many people, they dive into the thought process. Okay, we're making, say, 40 grand a month. We're doing well. Do you think there were signs earlier that money was about to stop flow? Like, obviously a lot of your financial stress came from like natural disaster based shit, right? That was out of your control. But was there operational things that you, like, looking back now in hindsight, go, okay, there were signs that we had problems?
Yeah, we have seasons.
Yeah,
absolutely. And if we didn't budget.
Mm-hmm.
The first 2 and a bit years, 3 probably.
Yep.
Which led to exactly that, because we would spend money that we needed for March, that we would spend in December.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that cycle continued for a few years where it was rough.
Yeah. Well, you either pay with time or pay with money.
Yeah.
You're going to learn the lesson either way.
And there was like, still in these phases of making like money, it was, I'd work on the business for 6 months when the business was doing really well. And then another 6 months, I'd go work somewhere random, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I hate a few jobs, but I do like working if I enjoy it, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the business.
That's very interesting.
Like for a wage, is what I mean.
That's very interesting, because not many people that are so in the depths of, call it entrepreneurship, can flick that switch.
Yeah, I worked at a nightclub for a while, and I remember this man coming in for his first shift, and he's like, complaining to me. He's like, I'm normally a bar supervisor. Now I'm picking up classes. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm like, I'm normally talking to thousands of people on a stage, and I have absolutely no problem picking up cups, because it's absolutely a turn off for me. Like it turns off my brain, and it lets me again build empathy, compassion, meet new people, and have fun. That's nothing related to YLA or the business.
Yeah. See, I'm the opposite. I one, struggle to switch off. But 2, my version of switching off is literally just, I will like plug me in front of a TV, mind numbing crap, and I don't watch much, but like that's the only time that I will switch off, and give me an opportunity to step into another workplace. I'm like, oh, no, I don't know. I'm
just like, and I think I'm really good at it because I work hard.
Mm-hmm.
So at any job I do it good.
Yep.
And like I've definitely had jobs I hated, like when the business was really doing bad, I did phone call sales, which what really, really motivated me to never have to work a day in my life again.
Yeah.
And then I've had another job just to make payroll, probably a year later, where it was like doing door-to-door sales, which also sucked. It was like 30 degrees in North Queensland, and I lasted about 2 days doing that, but I made payroll, so it was fine. But there's been like so many jobs where they've had good benefits, good perks where I was. I did tour guiding for 6 months from Sydney to Cairns. I got free accommodation for 6 months. I got to travel. I got to meet cool people. That wasn't work.
What's some of the lessons? Like, what do you? Okay, not just lessons, because life lessons are, you're going to come by life lessons every day. What are some of the lessons you learnt from all of your time doing other jobs, traveling, and so on, that you can now actually implement into your business?
I think the greatest thing that I've learned from having different jobs is the greatest thing I've learned would be perspective and understanding and developing compassion for other people. And whether that be in a nightclub, whether that be on a tour guide, whether that be in a call center, you have so much. I think it develops a huge amount of compassion for not only the people in the entrepreneurship area, because that's where I spend most of my time. That's where you spend most of your time, but the people outside of that, which are they are mainly our customers that aren't yet our customers.
Yeah.
Or they're the people who are our parents of our customers, and having a much deeper understanding of who they are and how the world works in different areas makes you a better business owner, makes you a better leader, makes you a better family member, whatever it may be, because you have more ability to connect and build rapport with people. And I think a good example of that is I don't really have any empathy, empathy for people who spoke a second language or had English as a second language until I started working with people from different countries and realizing that English is their second language, and I'm blown away by their ability to speak 2-3 languages.
Yeah. How do you deal? Okay, so the lessons, like, let's say, we'll look at like empathy and compassion. How does that now come into play day to day for you? Like there's two parts to this question. One, how does it come into play when we're talking about acquisition of new schools, right? And then also come into play of on stage presenting.
We go into a school now, which we kind of always do, but it's now at a new level, right? With no expectations, with no pre-existing ideas of what that school would be like, whether it be private, whether it be public, whether it be rural, whether it be metro. We go into them conversations with absolutely no preconceived ideas and ask meaningful questions, which then we get meaningful responses and actually be able to tailor make a program that does create impact rather than just being a one-hit wonder and creating no change, because there are so many products out there that do one thing and then nothing happens. And I haven't invested 5 years to make nothing happen from programs.
So what's your pipeline after the program? We
have post-event programs after every program, and then our programs include a process that which we call student-led initiatives, where the young people identify a problem in their community and create a solution. And my view of changing the world is by giving young people the resources and the tools and the equipment to be able to create change in their own communities.
Because I think I assume that's why you found that gap in the market. So many people want to make change but don't know how, don't have the resource, don't have the capital. Yeah.
So we give them a pipeline of how to do it and we use the same pipeline that I used as a 15-year-old trying to start YLA. We use that same business plan structure. We just name it a little bit differently, make it look nicer.
Yeah, systemize it. Yeah. Tie a pretty bow on it.
And then from a stage point of view, we have sometimes 2,000 plus people in the room from backgrounds of places I can't even pronounce. And if you don't have empathy and compassion, or you don't go on stage, this is again, I think when you go on stage, you can't be co-beneficial. It has to be full beneficial for the people in the room. And when you come in from compassion and empathy, you have the ability to do that.
That's very rare in the event space.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
Many people they run events exclusively to the entire event is just a sales pipeline for the big ask at the end. And they don't actually I've been to a lot of events, a lot of personal development events where they, people will just present for hours on, and they get to a point where it's like, you're about to find that nugget of information. Like, but that's in the next program. Yeah. That's it. And all of the entire day is just to G you up and to use NLP to get you to buy the thing that is later.
Which is like the most genius business strategy forever.
Of course.
And also we have call to actions throughout our events. However, again, co-beneficial. We believe our programs are seriously beneficial. We don't do it for ourselves. We do it for our young people in the room. I think everything's a contradiction in life, and that was probably one of the greatest lessons I have learned, actually. Everything's a contradiction because, yes, we can do everything for the young people in the room, and then there's still a benefit for us.
Yeah.
Whether it not be directly from me being on stage, but it's like the boost of the personal profile. That's a benefit that I don't go into create, but it just happens.
Yeah, well, I asked a question the other day on my own personal Instagram. I was like, okay, do you believe there is a such thing as a selfless good deed?
Ooh.
And I don't think there is. I only got one response that made sense, and that's letting someone take your life to save someone else.
Yeah, I think you can have the intention to be selfless. I think that's.
But if it makes you feel good, it's not selfless.
Yeah, yeah. I still think there's like you can have the intention to be selfless, like with not even wanting to feel good, just to do something like pick up a piece of rubbish. Like, you're not going to feel that good about it. Like, for me, it doesn't really matter. It probably does subconsciously. But the benefit is, like, that regardless, there's still a benefit if someone watches you. They're like, oh, what a good person.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. Like, that you're 100% right. I've never heard it being saying that way. But life is a contradiction. Everything is contradictive.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you're doing, even for, trying to do, and so many people say, like, I'm not in it to make money. It's like, okay, cool. That's not the intention. That's great. But you feel good when you're on stage, or you feel good when you do the service or the job, right?
Yeah.
It's still self-serving.
Yeah. 100%. And maybe it is that co-beneficial spectrum. Where are you on the spectrum of how much does it benefit you and how much does it benefit your audience?
And it's subjective too.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
and like, what you think is completely different to what the person in row 8 is going to think.
Absolutely. Why I'm going to ask the big question, why young people? Why do you think the change starts there?
Because whilst young people are only 25% of today, we're 100% of the future. And I do believe that there is work to be done on older generations, except the reality is if I came in and had a conversation with maybe a few generations above me, there wouldn't be the same response.
One, they wouldn't have the respect. Two, they wouldn't have the life experience. They wouldn't have the understanding of reality. And you'd probably fall a lot on deaf ears.
Yeah, like I think the way we move forward as a society is through intergenerational collaboration, where we work alongside not only our generation but the generations above us and the generations below us to be able to move forward. That has been my fundamental belief, and the reason why there were so many hate comments on the Daily Mail thing was literally because the headline was declares war on boomers. Like, of course, that's not going to go down well on the 12 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Yeah,
you know who's hanging out on the internet, but it was like that was never the intention. I do put a lot of pressure on older generations to think differently and think more in a way of having hope for young people, because I do have extreme amounts of hope for the future, which is, I think, rare.
I think though that what you said there is like it's bi-directional, it's omnidirectional, it's up and down, left and right. That collaboration should be coming from every direction, because there's a lot that we can take from older generations as well, just even lifestyle. Like, you look at like how much we spend on technology now in comparison. Like, there's a reason why mental health is at such a massive rate of decline.
100%, and we see it every single day. The gap of suicide, depression, anxiety, sadness in young people is getting wider and wider and wider from and that's like why we started primary school programs, because it's happening in 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and they need support and they need early intervention to be able to stop prevention, really. Which is why, like, even we've led to moving to a social enterprise, which I mentioned to you before, where 100% of profits fund youth suicide prevention, because it's the number one killer of young people in the world, in Australia.
What's the like the whole movement forward for you now? Like, if we look strategy, because like you've moved into a social enterprise, right, which arguably means there's less profit for the business to do what it like could do if it wasn't. Right, but it allows you more opportunity with all of the the funding that comes with that and the open doors that brings. What's the strategy for you moving forward to grow this further? Yeah,
that's like when people like ask if you're in it for the money. I'm like, well, I'm no longer a shareholder, so there's a charity as the shareholder, and the contradiction of like, this isn't about me, is when we move to a social enterprise, my personal profile goes up. Like, that's the reality. Like, I've been nominated for awards now, which was never, again, the intention, but it happens.
Of course, yeah.
And I think the strategy for YLA is still operate as a business, because, and we sat there I sat there in my brain for days and weeks and months on how do we still make this exciting for me and double our impact. And I was like, okay, we still run for profit. But we still operate as a business. I'm still an entrepreneur if it's still for profit, except now the profit goes to suicide prevention.
So you're still doing P&Ls, you're still looking at your numbers and still actually trying to drive forward. Yeah,
100%. So I'm still like that. I still feel entrepreneurial. I still get to be entrepreneurial. And then the other side of it is like travel is a huge part of where I want my personal brand to go. And I have had this like conversation with myself for 2 years nearly. My two big passions, young people, leadership, whatever, business, and then the second one being travel. And there's so many people online who are like, you can't have two niches, and I'm like, I want two niches. But now I've just separated them. So now I have 2 online personalities.
Yeah.
Will Massara, Will the Nomad.
Man, like, why not? But I think at some point as well, you could probably just combine that.
Yeah, well, one day, but right now my feed just gets a little bit confused.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like motivational, and then like Fiji.
Yeah, $2 meals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think this is probably, I guess, going to be a lengthy question, but what do you feel like the biggest back-end strategical plays you've made that has actually made what you've created feel more like a business?
Setting up support systems around you and around the business who not only lift you up, but also lift the business up in a way that, again, everything I believe in is obviously co-beneficial for them as well as you, whether that be financially for them, whether it be for their profile, whether it be for their businesses, but it also benefits our business on a level as well. And that is seriously what's got me through every challenge that we've ever been through, and again is why we've been so supportive. And I fundamentally believe that the only reason we are alive is because of the people around me. And I think if you set them systems up in your business and people, then them teams, you will survive. And I think there was so much fear around being one of them, like 98% of startups that fail. And I think if you don't want to fail, you set yourself up with people around you who can pull you up through them dips.
What's some of the, like, could you give us an example of like some of the things you implemented that actually created impact like that? If we're looking like teams or team structures and stuff like that, is there anything that, like, because like I know you talk to a lot of a lot of the younger generation, and a lot of them may walk away from your conversations with a lot of motivation of like, okay, well, Will did it. Like, I can go start my own different thing. Yeah. But what if someone wanted to create something that was like what you have done? What's some of the, I guess, back end, like if we look at team culture strategies or team systems, like you mentioned, they're having a great team and those are the people that have made you survive weather the storm. What's some of the things that you've actually put in place that have created change there?
I think the biggest thing is, how do you build loyalty in a team? And not only like your team underneath, like in YLA or in your business, but further than that as well. And the way you do that is simply by nurturing trust, whether that be through consistency. There's 4 C's to trust: consistency, compassion, character, and competence. And you nurture your communities and your teams with trust. That builds loyalty, that builds engagement to then have your back. And I think if you need to all work together collaboratively to be able to hold that trust together. If one person steps out, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And also recognizing that what we're working towards is much bigger than ourselves, and the power of one is extremely insignificant, but also underestimated. But when we unite, we create meaningful long-term change. United individuals create change.
Devil's advocate. If one person left and everything would fall apart, does that put a business in a bit of a tricky position to have key man syndrome where every person is a key man that can't be replaced?
I think, yes, I do think that. And I think what I would mean if one person left, it would be like, if one person isn't pulling their weight, then the entire team morale is going to drop. So how do we keep each other accountable to be able to remain at the same level, right? And then if one person does leave, how do we find, what system do we actually have in place to be able to replace that person, or outsource that person, or find someone to fill that role?
Yeah.
And is that role really needed?
Well, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
Can you run leaner?
Yeah, exactly. And I do believe we are one of the leanest companies ever. Just because I have, like, even when we talk to venues, we negotiate for months to be able to get the lowest rate possible. Why? Because every dollar that we spend on a venue is a dollar away from young people.
It's a good way to look at it, man. What's some take home points, man? Like, if we were to look at your entire entrepreneurial journey so far, what's something that you wish you had have learnt from day one?
Water the grass of your relationships. Yeah, number one. Water the grass of your relationships, and then they will be there to support you, and you can be there to support them too. And that is what builds a system that you can rely on. The second one is do whatever you can to build up your confidence in yourself to own your story. That will bring more people on the journey with you. And amazing. I think number 3 is, regardless of where you are or what you're doing, the downs always come and the ups are always next. Yeah.
Cap us off, man. What is your story? What is the story you are owning over the next 5 years? What is the thing you are chasing, and what story do you hold true?
Diversifying my personal and professional career. And what that looks like, whether that looks like me as a CEO of Youth Leadership Academy Australia, whether that looks like me as Will the Nomad, whether that looks like me as Will Massara, the public speaker or the keynote speaker or the social entrepreneur, whatever it may be, being able to diversify all of them to be able to create sustainable businesses and sustainable impact.
Amazing, man. Where can people find you, and what have you got going on in your world at the moment?
At Will Massara on Instagram with 1L. The pen ran out of ink when I was born. And Will the Nomad on everything else as well. What's going on in my world? Actually, we're just doing a lot of flying, to be fair. This is flight number 2 of 6 over the next 6 days, yeah.
Busy man. Man. Well, thank you for making the time to come down. I really, really appreciate it. We'll chuck all of your details in the show notes below.
But it's been an absolute pleasure.
Man, I think moving forward, I think just for everyone at home, if you are either like a lot of our listeners here are, they're starting their own businesses, but if you have children, if you have kids, get in contact with Will, get him into your school, because it's going to be a massive impact on your children moving forward. Thanks, Will, and we'll talk soon.
It's been a pleasure.
It's only worth it if you work for it. It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown.